Sera, there has been a lot of public discourse around Penn setting a boundary in the latest season.
Oh, yes, the famous
of
boundaries.
you.
Right.
And
Jeez.
I want to know, for you as a showrunner, what was it like to have that conversation with Penn?
And I want to set the disclaimer just so I don't know if you've heard, but I've been clear about how, receptive and gracious
all
you
the
were.
coverage has been 100% in Sarah's corner and then 50% in Penn's, 50% against Penn. Everyone in your corner.
I really,
So anyway,
I
go
admire
ahead.
the way you've been handling that conversation. Like, predictably, when the word sex appears in the title of something,
just-
it will.
yeah, it's
and
really-
I do think that the discourse has gone far beyond anything that you were talking about.
Yeah, it
Yes,
has.
totally.
Definitely. And about what we were talking about. I mean, I
Yeah.
think like
Yeah.
it was sort of initially a private conversation, and it's become public now, so it is what it is. But it'd be interesting to hear your.
Yeah. One fun thing is we were an hour at least into the phone call when
Oh,
you brought it up,
probably
right?
more.
Because I
I mean,
pitched
'cause
you the
you-
whole season.
Yeah, and in
you were
fact,
like,
I waited to. It was something that I knew that I wanted to ask, as I've said, and I'll clarify here again.
Yeah.
Before we met, this was something that I even wanted to set in my own career. Didn't understand if it was possible.
Yeah.
Who knows what the future holds? It was just like my orientation, and therefore something I thought about. So by the time this pitch for season 4 comes along, it seemed like I was like, actually, Joe's kind of headed in this direction, maybe.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna go ahead and see. So anyway,
he definitely wasn't like in a marriage and cheating on his wife and having foursomes with her. So it was a good time to say we can reduce.
yeah,
It was not a very difficult conversation for me.
no,
Honestly, like, first of all, nobody was saying I refuse to do something. We were both just saying, like, what are we going to, my job in that conversation was just to, like, pinpoint exactly what you were asking for and what was making you uncomfortable. And, like, there's a big difference, for example, between saying, I have a problem with the content of the show you're writing, and I am having this issue around my own performance, like what my job is demanding that I do, specifically with my body. And I just don't think that's a very complicated conversation for us to have, because
Right.
we're not in the business of saying strip down and touch someone if, that's not what you want to do.
Yeah, that actually brings up how it's also not a common. It's like there's one thing I've said too is like when people bring up well, what about murder? It's like, guys, I'm not murdering anybody. At the end of the day, there's something that you can't simulate, which is physical touch. It just comes down to that. It's like not everybody has to do this in their job. It just is. It's like there's a lot of. I caught up on the negative feedback way after the fact, and then I was like, oh, okay. But people love to state so clearly as though they've experienced this. Like, why don't you just do your job?
Yeah.
Well,
And
I,
it's
I
like-
mean, everybody's, we're not all the same. There's stuff I won't write. So I don't
Sure,
take those jobs, or I'm not right for and there are things, for example, if you were like, how about a little like right-wing propaganda? Like, we'll pay you really, really well, right? I don't know. I can't think. It's like, I have lines that I don't,
Right.
but it doesn't matter what the actor next to you is comfortable with. They may feel a completely different way about
Right,
what kissing, they may think it's not the same, which is fine because that's their, but you're the two people in that conversation are me and you. We're making the show together. We were many years into it at this point. And it's just like, let me understand. My job is just let me understand the parameters and then come back with a plan. It becomes, surprisingly quickly, it becomes very technical, right?
Yeah.
I was the nightmare version of a conversation like that is, I just think it's bad that we murder people. Or like, I don't want this character to be in sexual situations, but you started by saying, like, I do understand the show we're making, and let's not speak in absolutes, but also I understand like the story we're telling. I'm not asking for a different story. I'm just saying this with my body. And it's like, well, it's your body. So, and since time immemorial, and it's called cinema, right? Because we do magic. It's all smoke and mirrors. And so when I came back, like the first conversation was about all this stuff we didn't even really end up needing to do, which is like body doubles, VFX, using certain angles, certain camera lenses. Just, I was like, listen, so we have this arsenal of things we can do if we need to. And how about we just like look at the scenes and talk about them, right? I will say that, so I haven't been doing this as long as you have, but almost, right? I've been working in television for almost 20 years. And the industry has changed a lot. In that time, I was frequently the only woman in the room when I started, and the only woman on set. And, when intimacy coordinators became a thing, I was very relieved because I had been sort of an amateur intimacy coordinator for a couple of years. There were times when I would fly to a set in Vancouver because I felt like I should be there that day because something very intimate was going to happen and I just wanted to be present. But it is also a weird feeling to be the boss and it's not quite right. So I was relieved that we were making these strides and having this conversation at all because I'm certainly not in this business to make people feel bad and weird and uncomfortable. Like, we're playing games and we're having fun. We're all doing what we love the most, hopefully, and nobody's feeling weird about people touching them. And so I'm glad. I have to say, I think it's nice to have that imperfect as it has been, it's nice to see that conversation happen where a man has been talking about this because I think people hear it a little bit differently when it's a woman saying that, and usually it is.
That's true.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that about you.
That's an interesting perspective on it too. Yeah. The nature of the way that we had that conversation, it felt like it was just kind of, if it hadn't become a sort of a public soundbite, I don't know that people would have noticed that much, And
no,
but I think so. I've had my qualms about whether or not it feels like, well, is that like, but I do think you're right. I think it's positive that at least some man has entered the conversation as well, and I don't necessarily see myself like in that role doing that thing all the time. But it does seem like maybe just a necessary part of it.
It's just like the same way that we're gonna all have different comfort levels with a lot of stuff. You have the comfort level you have with disclosing how you feel publicly and talking about it and having conversation about it, which is great.
Yeah.
And but the funny thing is people would be shocked to know all of the things that were faked or different or rewritten on the day, or like one of the actors had the flu, so like nobody was kissing. And if we do our jobs right, if the director is clever on the day and then the editor and I are clever in post, then you won't be watching it going, why doesn't this story work? We'll have found some way to rewrite and reset the scene so that it gives you whatever feeling it needed to have. And that happens all the time with people who change their minds about taking their pants off in a scene, or for whatever reason need to stay 6 feet for COVID kind of stuff, So, where the rubber meets the road, it was not a very big deal for the season in terms of, there were a couple of things, come to think of, where like we were sort of figuring it out a little bit in the writing, and there was like one scene we had to reshoot.
That's right, yeah.
But
I feel like that wasn't even, that was more, are you talking about the Kate scene from episode 3, I think it is? That,
in the park?
Yes, in the park. But
it wasn't originally in the
park.
It
wasn't originally in the park.
No.
See,
I went too far.
Clever.
Yeah,
I'll own it. I went too far. And I think part of it was that I was like, how much can I just remove these things in the scene? And so the fact that the two of you were like hate flirting a lot at that point, I was like, so there won't be any kissing. And then for whatever reason that she was taking him into this very sexual environment, this club. Yeah. And it was just too far. It was too cold.
Well, I think what it was is that was discovering like where the heart of the show is or isn't. You know, it ended up being too hateful.
Yeah.
Right.
Which on the page, I have to say, worked. Like on the page, somehow it did make sense, and then something about the way we were bringing it to life, like it just somehow didn't track with everything else we're doing.
Yeah, and also, I mean, Joe is a fundamentally romantic character,
Yeah.
and even if he's like, banging someone he hates for the moment because they haven't fallen in love yet, right? Yeah. Still, it has to be. This is what I learned, still learning in season 4 of the show, right? Like, it has to be the romantic comedy version of this. We're not going to do the David Fincher version of that scene where it's cold and it's clinical and it's, sexy. We're going to do the Notting Hill version.
I would say David Fincher's even gone where it's not even sexy. It's just, it's very, it's like
disturbing.
Sera, this is so vindicating because we said to Penn at some point, we think that You is basically a rom-com. But also, and he was like, rom-com? I've never thought of it as a rom-com.
It's both at the same time.
No, I mean, I knew what you were saying, but I think the way you said it, I was trying to catch you in the, I think you were saying it, Sophie. And I was like, it's not a rom-com.
I know. I really did love Joe until episode 8. Yeah. Now I'm...
Uh-oh.